In the ever-evolving landscape of modern medicine, few stories capture the public imagination as powerfully as the rise of Ozempic and Wegovy. Marketed as transformative solutions for type 2 diabetes and obesity, these drugs have been hailed as miracles in a syringe. They promised weight loss, metabolic control, and a new sense of self for millions. Yet beneath the glossy campaigns, social media hype, and celebrity endorsements, a darker, more troubling narrative has emerged. One involving severe health risks, patient suffering, and allegations of corporate negligence. The story of Ozempic and Wegovy is not merely about a drug. It is about the intersection of human vulnerability, pharmaceutical power, and the pursuit of justice in a world dominated by profit. From its inception, Ozempic represented hope. Developed by the Danish pharmaceutical giant Novo Nordisk, the drug was approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in 2017 for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Its mechanism of action seemed elegant. The active ingredient, semaglutide, mimics a hormone called GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, that regulates insulin secretion, blood sugar levels, and appetite. Patients were instructed to inject it once a week, and the results were undeniably promising. Many reported improved blood sugar control and gradual, sustainable weight loss. Soon, off-label prescriptions became common, and Novo Nordisk seized the opportunity to expand the drug's market. Wegovy was introduced specifically targeting weight management in adults, gaining FDA approval in 2021. The marketing machinery was relentless. Television ads showed smiling, energetic individuals shedding pounds effortlessly. Social media influencers documented their transformations, framing the drug as a life-changing solution that allowed ordinary people to achieve extraordinary results. The allure of a miracle was irresistible. Patients, doctors, and investors alike were swept up in the excitement. By 2023, Novo Nordisk reported revenues exceeding $33 billion, largely fueled by the global demand for Ozempic and Wegovy. The company had succeeded not only in marketing a drug, but in creating a cultural phenomenon, a societal obsession with rapid, medically assisted weight loss. But as the popularity of these drugs soared, troubling reports began to surface. Individual stories, initially dismissed as anomalies, soon formed a pattern. Patients described severe gastrointestinal distress, persistent nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and difficulty eating. Some experienced extreme fatigue, dizziness, and dehydration. Medical literature began documenting rare but serious complications, including pancreatitis, thyroid tumors, and a condition known as gastroparesis, where the stomach fails to empty properly. For some, the side effects were so severe that they required hospitalization, sometimes repeatedly, dramatically altering their quality of life. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button. One such patient, whom we will call Monique Taylor to protect her identity, represents the human face of these statistics. At 34, a mother of two, Monique had struggled with weight and mild type 2 diabetes for years. She had hoped that Ozempic would be a manageable aid in her treatment plan. At first, the results seemed miraculous. She lost several pounds within weeks and her blood sugar stabilized. Friends and family praised her transformation, but then the nausea started, subtle at first, a minor inconvenience she attributed to dietary changes. Within weeks, her symptoms escalated. She could no longer eat without severe pain. Simple meals became torturous. Her daily life was dominated by hospital visits, IV fluids, and constant discomfort. Monique was eventually diagnosed with gastroparesis, a condition directly linked to her use of the drug. Her life, once full of energy and hope, was consumed by illness and uncertainty. She is one among hundreds, if not thousands, now seeking answers through the legal system. The legal landscape surrounding Ozempic and Wegovy is complex. Beginning in 2023, lawsuits alleging failure to warn patients about potential side effects began to mount. Legal filings claimed that Novo Nordisk had knowledge of these risks, but failed to adequately inform doctors and patients. By mid-2025, over 1,800 lawsuits had been consolidated into a multi-district litigation in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. The plaintiffs' attorneys argue that the company's conduct demonstrates a troubling prioritization of profit over patient safety. These cases are being closely watched, not just by those directly affected, but by the medical community and regulatory agencies, as they may set precedent for how pharmaceutical companies disclose risks and how patients can hold them accountable. Novo Nordisk has consistently denied wrongdoing. The company emphasizes that all known side effects are included in product labeling, and that both drugs are safe when used as prescribed. They highlight that clinical trials supporting the efficacy and safety of semaglutide and the FDA's rigorous review process. Yet plaintiffs counter that the trials, while extensive, did not fully reflect real-world use and that off-label use magnified risks that were not adequately studied. This tension between corporate assurances and patient experiences has fueled a growing public debate about the ethics of pharmaceutical marketing and the transparency of drug risk reporting. Did you follow the Ozempic story? Share your thoughts with us. Beyond individual cases, the narrative of Ozempic and Wegovy raises broader societal questions. The drug's meteoric popularity underscores America's obsession with weight, beauty, and the quick-fix solution. Social media amplified the cultural pressure to achieve certain body standards, and pharmaceutical companies capitalized on this desire. Patients were not merely seeking medical treatment. They were seeking social validation and personal transformation, making them especially vulnerable to marketing messages that emphasized benefits while downplaying potential harms. The intersection of social pressure, medical innovation, and corporate strategy created fertile ground for both hope and harm. Moreover, the lawsuits have revealed fractures within the medical community itself. While some healthcare providers defend the use of Ozempic and Wegovy as life-changing interventions, others caution against the widespread adoption of these drugs without long-term safety data. Physicians have reported instances of patients experiencing severe adverse effects within months of initiating therapy, sometimes necessitating hospitalization or invasive procedures. The tension between professional guidance, corporate influence, and patient autonomy has become a central theme in this unfolding story. The stakes extend far beyond the individual patient. Should these lawsuits succeed, they could reshape regulatory practices and the accountability of pharmaceutical companies. A victory for plaintiffs may lead to stricter disclosure requirements, enhanced post-market surveillance, and potentially significant financial repercussions for Novo Nordisk. On the other hand, a ruling in favor of the company could embolden other pharmaceutical manufacturers to adopt similar marketing strategies, potentially at the expense of patient safety. In either scenario, the outcome will reverberate across the medical industry, influencing how new drugs are introduced, prescribed, and monitored in the future. Amid the legal and ethical battles, the human stories remain at the forefront. Patients like Monique Taylor grapple with physical pain, emotional trauma, and financial strain. Many have had to leave their jobs, reduce social interactions, or undergo extensive medical treatment to manage complications. Their narratives are deeply personal, yet collectively they highlight systemic issues within the pharmaceutical industry. The tension between innovation and risk, profit and transparency, marketing and ethics. These experiences provide a stark reminder that behind every blockbuster drug statistic is a human life affected, sometimes irreversibly, by choices made far away in corporate boardrooms. In telling this story, it is crucial to confront uncomfortable truths. The promise of a miracle drug can mask real and present dangers. Marketing campaigns and social media trends can obscure risk, especially when patients are desperate for solutions to chronic conditions. The intersection of corporate power, regulatory oversight, and patient vulnerability creates a landscape in which harm can occur even when intentions are presented as benevolent. Understanding this complexity is essential for anyone engaging with the story of Ozempic and Wegovy. As we continue, we will delve deeper into the scientific evidence supporting and questioning the safety of these drugs, explore the legal battles that aim to hold Novo Nordisk accountable, and examine the broader societal implications of pharmaceutical marketing strategies. The story of Ozempic and Wegovy is far from over. It is a cautionary tale of innovation, ambition, and the human cost of medical oversight. As viewers of White Coat Secrets, your engagement is vital. If you or someone you know has been affected by Ozempic or Wegovy, we encourage you to share your story in the comments below. Every voice contributes to uncovering the truths that the pharmaceutical industry may prefer to hide. Subscribe to our channel to follow this unfolding investigation, because justice, accountability, and transparency are not just ideals, they are necessities in a world where health and human lives intersect with corporate interests. The promise of Ozempic and Wegovy captivated the public because it seemed backed by science. Clinical trials published in respected journals touted weight loss results that were unprecedented for non-surgical interventions. Patients shed pounds rapidly, blood sugar stabilized, and cardiovascular risk factors improved. On the surface, it appeared to be a triumph of modern medicine, a drug that delivered real results with minimal inconvenience, just one injection per week. For Monique Taylor and countless others, this promise was irresistible. After months of struggling to manage her weight and diabetes through diet and exercise, the drug offered a new kind of hope. She injected the first dose with cautious optimism, imagining the life she could reclaim. Her blood sugar improved and her weight began to drop. Friends noticed the change. Her confidence grew, and for a moment, it felt like a miracle. But miracles, as it turned out, are never entirely without cost. As Ozempic's popularity grew, so did scrutiny. Physicians and researchers began questioning whether the short-term trial results reflected long-term realities. Some adverse effects were expected. Mild gastrointestinal discomfort was anticipated. But what emerged were reports that went beyond the scope of initial studies: chronic nausea, severe vomiting, gastroparesis, liver issues, and in rare cases, vision loss. What worried doctors and researchers most was the lack of long-term safety data for widespread use, especially off-label and among patients without type 2 diabetes. The FDA's approval of Wegovy in 2021, targeting obesity, intensified the debate. The decision was celebrated in headlines as a milestone for public health, a drug to tackle America's obesity epidemic. But beneath the celebration, some experts raised red flags. They pointed out that while Wegovy's trials demonstrated efficacy in controlled environments, real-world patients often present complex comorbidities, which the studies could not fully account for. Gastrointestinal side effects, already concerning, could be more severe outside clinical trials. Furthermore, certain rare but serious complications, like pancreatitis or gastroparesis, might emerge only after long-term use by thousands of patients. Monique Taylor's experience became emblematic of these concerns. While Wegovy had not been approved specifically for her demographic, she had been prescribed it off-label for weight loss. Within months, her symptoms escalated. Chronic nausea turned into debilitating vomiting, and she lost the ability to eat without extreme discomfort. Her medical team struggled to manage the complications. Every day became a delicate balance between controlling blood sugar, managing pain, and maintaining nutrition. Her life was no longer one of empowerment. It was a daily fight for survival. Researchers studying Ozempic and Wegovy began to document these outcomes. Some physicians submitted adverse event reports to the FDA, a regulatory mechanism designed to track potential risks post-approval. Yet these reports often remained buried within databases, inaccessible to the public. While clinical trials offered a sanitized view of the drug's effects, the real-world evidence painted a more nuanced and often alarming picture. Corporate influence complicated the narrative further. Novo Nordisk, flush with billions in revenue, had a vested interest in promoting the drug's benefits while downplaying potential risks. Marketing campaigns highlighted weight loss success stories. Social media influencers demonstrated dramatic transformations, and glossy advertisements framed the drugs as safe and life-changing. Critics argued that this approach masked the truth, that patients like Monique were suffering, sometimes profoundly, from adverse effects that were downplayed or not fully disclosed. Medical ethics came into sharp focus. Physicians prescribing Ozempic and Wegovy faced an ethical dilemma: the desire to help patients achieve weight loss and diabetes control versus the responsibility to fully disclose potential risks, especially for off-label use. The growing number of patients reporting serious side effects raised questions about informed consent and corporate accountability. Were patients truly aware of the risks, or had they been persuaded by the promise of a miracle? Scientific journals began publishing cautionary studies. Researchers analyzed adverse event reports, reviewed patient histories, and examined trial data, highlighting potential gaps in understanding long-term effects. While some findings were inconclusive, the accumulating evidence created a ripple of concern within the medical community. Physicians debated the ethics of widespread prescribing, especially given the financial incentives for pharmaceutical companies to expand the market. Monique Taylor's story, shared anonymously through patient advocacy groups, became a focal point for discussion. Her experience illustrated a key problem. Real patients, outside the controlled environment of clinical trials, were experiencing severe and sometimes irreversible complications. Her case underscored the importance of transparency in both scientific research and corporate marketing. Amid these debates, regulatory scrutiny intensified. The FDA faced pressure from consumer advocacy groups, medical professionals, and media outlets to re-examine the risk profile of Ozempic and Wegovy. Questions arose about whether post-marketing surveillance was adequate, whether warnings were communicated effectively, and whether patients were given enough information to make informed decisions. Meanwhile, Novo Nordisk defended its position. The company emphasized that both drugs had been rigorously tested, that known side effects were included in labeling, and that the benefits outweighed the risks. Executives argued that adverse effects were rare and manageable. Yet for patients like Monique, these assurances offered little comfort. The human cost was immediate and tangible, a reality that could not be captured by statistics or corporate statements. The tension between corporate messaging and patient experience created a narrative ripe for investigation. On one hand, the drugs represented a medical breakthrough. On the other hand, the growing body of adverse reports, coupled with aggressive marketing tactics, suggested a potential cover-up of risks. Patients were caught in the crossfire, seeking health, empowerment, and normalcy, only to find themselves navigating unexpected and severe complications. This chapter reveals the conflict at the heart of the Ozempic and Wegovy saga: science versus corporate interest, patient safety versus profit, transparency versus marketing. The stakes are high, not just for individuals, but for the medical community and the integrity of pharmaceutical oversight. The unfolding story forces a confrontation with difficult questions. How much risk is acceptable for a miracle drug? Who is responsible when patients suffer? Can the system balance innovation with accountability? As this series continues, we will explore the personal, emotional stories of patients, examine the ongoing lawsuits, and investigate the broader implications for healthcare, ethics, and corporate responsibility. Monique Taylor's story is only the beginning. Her struggles highlight the urgent need for transparency, informed consent, and vigilance in the face of powerful corporate interests. For viewers of White Coat Secrets, this is more than a story about a drug. It is a call to awareness and action. If you or someone you know has experienced adverse effects from Ozempic or Wegovy, share your story in the comments below. Engage, discuss, and subscribe to follow this investigation as we uncover the truths behind one of the most controversial medical developments of our time. Justice, accountability, and transparency are not optional. They are essential. Monique Taylor's life had been transformed by Ozempic in ways she never imagined. Initially, it promised hope and control, a solution to years of struggle with weight and diabetes. Yet, the promise quickly unraveled into suffering, chronic nausea, debilitating gastroparesis, and hospital visits that consumed her days and nights. Like countless others, Monique found herself trapped in a system where the very treatment meant to improve her life became a source of pain and uncertainty. But she refused to remain silent. The fight against Novo Nordisk was not just about her individual suffering. It was about holding a giant corporation accountable. By 2023, a growing chorus of patients, lawyers, and advocacy groups had banded together to challenge the company. Thousands of complaints, previously scattered and overlooked, were consolidated into a multi-district litigation, MDL, in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Legal experts compared the situation to historic cases against Big Tobacco, where corporations were accused of prioritizing profits over human lives. The lawsuits were multifaceted. Plaintiffs alleged that Novo Nordisk failed to adequately warn patients and healthcare providers about severe risks, particularly for off-label use and long-term consumption. They argued that the company knew, or should have known, that gastrointestinal complications, gastroparesis, liver issues, and even rare neurological damage were possible. Despite internal studies and adverse event reports, critics claimed that Novo Nordisk minimized the severity of these risks in marketing materials, press releases, and social media campaigns. Monique Taylor's legal journey began when she connected with a patient advocacy group online. Hearing stories eerily similar to her own, patients hospitalized, lives upended, families strained, she realized that her suffering was not isolated. With guidance from attorneys specializing in pharmaceutical litigation, she filed her complaint. The process was daunting. Complex legal forms, medical documentation, and months of preparation were required. Yet each step reinforced her determination. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every patient whose pain had been minimized or ignored. The courtroom became a stage for conflict between patient advocates and corporate defense teams. Novo Nordisk deployed a battery of lawyers, scientific experts, and public relations professionals, emphasizing clinical trial data, FDA approval, and the argument that the drugs were safe when used as directed. Plaintiffs countered with personal testimonies, hospital records, and adverse event reports, painting a starkly different picture, one of human suffering hidden behind glossy advertisements and statistical summaries. Expert testimony played a critical role in the lawsuits. Medical professionals described how patients like Monique experienced life-altering complications that were not fully represented in clinical trials. Gastroenterologists explained the mechanisms behind gastroparesis and other gastrointestinal effects, highlighting how semaglutide could disrupt the normal functioning of the digestive system. Endocrinologists and pharmacologists discussed the long-term implications of repeated use and off-label prescribing, emphasizing that patients were essentially participating in an uncontrolled experiment without informed consent. The narrative of conflict extended beyond the courtroom. Media coverage highlighted the emotional toll on patients, bringing public attention to the growing controversy. Social media amplified their voices, allowing patients to share their experiences, support one another, and challenge corporate messaging. Online communities became hubs of advocacy, spreading awareness about potential risks and encouraging patients to seek legal counsel. Monique Taylor, once a private individual struggling in isolation, became part of a collective movement demanding accountability. Novo Nordisk's defense strategy relied heavily on framing the drugs as medically necessary and beneficial, pointing to weight loss statistics, improved glucose control, and cardiovascular health improvements. They argued that adverse effects were rare and manageable and that warnings and labeling in product information were sufficient. However, plaintiffs maintained that these measures were inadequate, particularly in light of aggressive marketing campaigns that portrayed the drugs as miracle solutions. The legal debate hinged on questions of knowledge, disclosure, and responsibility. Did the company knowingly obscure the risks? Were patients and doctors truly informed? And who ultimately bears responsibility when harm occurs? As the litigation unfolded, it became clear that the stakes extended far beyond individual compensation. A favorable ruling for plaintiffs could set a precedent that reshaped our pharmaceutical industry's approach to safety disclosures, marketing practices, and corporate accountability. Conversely, a ruling favoring Novo Nordisk could reinforce a culture where corporate interests eclipse patient safety, leaving individuals vulnerable to harm in the pursuit of profit. For Monique Taylor, the legal battle was emotionally and physically exhausting. Court dates, depositions, and medical evaluations demanded her energy and focus. Yet the fight also provided a sense of purpose. Each testimony, each piece of evidence submitted, was a step toward justice, not just for her, but for every patient affected by the drug. In interviews with advocacy groups, she emphasized the importance of speaking out, warning others, and challenging powerful institutions that might otherwise remain unaccountable. The lawsuits also sparked broader discussions about healthcare, ethics, and corporate responsibility. Scholars, journalists, and policymakers debated the role of pharmaceutical companies in promoting off-label use, the adequacy of FDA oversight, and the moral obligation to prioritize patient well-being over profit. Patient stories, once anecdotal and scattered, became central to this discourse, illustrating the human cost behind regulatory language and clinical data. As the legal battles continue, the conflict between patients and Novo Nordisk has become a symbol of a larger struggle. The tension between innovation and oversight, between profit and protection, and between corporate power and individual rights. Monique Taylor's journey is emblematic of this struggle, a fight grounded not only in personal suffering, but in the pursuit of justice for all those who have been harmed yet silenced. For viewers of White Coat Secrets, this chapter is a reminder of the power of collective action and the importance of vigilance. The stories of patients like Monique Taylor highlight the need for transparency, accountability, and informed consent in medical treatment. This fight is far from over, and the outcomes of these lawsuits may redefine the relationship between patients, healthcare providers, and pharmaceutical companies for years to come. If you or someone you know has been affected by Ozempic or Wegovy, share your story in the comments below. Join the conversation, raise awareness, and subscribe to our channel to follow every step of this battle. Because when patients fight for justice, every voice counts, and together, we can hold powerful institutions accountable. Monique Taylor had fought tirelessly in the courtroom, sharing her story of suffering and resilience. Her battle against Novo Nordisk, however, was only part of a larger narrative. The controversy surrounding Ozempic and Wegovy revealed cracks in the system, gaps in regulatory oversight, ethical tensions in pharmaceutical marketing, and the profound human cost of decisions made in corporate boardrooms. As the lawsuits progressed, the focus shifted from individual compensation to systemic accountability. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, had approved both Ozempic and Wegovy after rigorous review, citing strong clinical trial data, demonstrating efficacy in controlling blood sugar and promoting weight loss. Yet critics argued that the FDA had relied too heavily on controlled trials that did not fully reflect real-world usage. The trials often excluded patients with comorbidities, off-label use wasn't studied in depth, and long-term side effects remained largely unknown. This discrepancy raised critical questions. Was the regulatory process sufficient to protect the public? Did patients truly have access to the information necessary to make informed decisions? Monique Taylor, once overwhelmed by her illness, became a symbol in this debate. Through interviews with patient advocacy groups and medical watchdog organizations, she highlighted the tension between FDA approval and patient safety. "I trusted the system," she said. "I believed a government-approved drug would be safe, but my life was upended in ways I never imagined. Patients deserve transparency. We deserve to know the full risks before we start treatment." Her words resonated with thousands who had suffered similar complications, creating a movement demanding better accountability from both regulatory agencies and pharmaceutical companies. Beyond the FDA, the lawsuits spurred discussions about corporate ethics in medicine. Novo Nordisk's marketing strategies had promoted Ozempic and Wegovy as near-miraculous solutions. Celebrity endorsements, social media trends, and viral success stories created cultural pressure to adopt these drugs, sometimes without adequate understanding of the risks. Critics argued that this approach prioritized profit over patient welfare, illustrating a troubling intersection of business interests and human health. Patients, they said, were effectively part of a large, real-world experiment without fully informed consent. Monique's story became a touchstone for systemic reform. Advocacy groups used her experience to lobby for stronger post-market surveillance, clearer labeling, and mandatory disclosure of all known risks. Physicians began questioning protocols for off-label prescribing, emphasizing that patient safety must remain paramount. Public attention and media coverage amplified the urgency of these reforms, shining a spotlight on the broader implications of the Ozempic and Wegovy saga. The scientific community also entered the conversation. Researchers examined data from adverse event reports, long-term patient outcomes, and clinical trials, seeking to understand the full impact of semaglutide-based drugs. Questions about chronic gastrointestinal complications, rare neurological damage, and the drug's effects on vulnerable populations drove new studies. The growing evidence base reinforced the need for transparency, rigorous monitoring, and clear communication between doctors, patients, and regulatory authorities. Systemic change, however, requires more than awareness. It demands action. Monique Taylor and thousands of other patients have become advocates, testifying before congressional committees, participating in public forums, and engaging with media outlets to ensure that the human cost of these drugs is not ignored. Their stories highlight a critical lesson. The fight for accountability is ongoing, and patient voices are essential in shaping healthcare policy and corporate responsibility. The implications extend beyond Ozempic and Wegovy. The controversy underscores the importance of vigilance whenever a new drug enters the market. It serves as a warning that FDA approval, while important, does not guarantee absolute safety. Patients must ask questions, seek multiple medical opinions, and advocate for themselves. Healthcare providers must balance the promise of innovation with careful consideration of risks. And pharmaceutical companies must recognize that ethical responsibility is inseparable from financial success. Monique Taylor's journey illustrates both the challenges and the power of patient advocacy. She endured months of pain, hospital visits, and uncertainty. She confronted a multinational corporation and navigated complex legal proceedings. Yet through her persistence, she amplified her voice and the voices of countless others who suffered silently. Her story demonstrates that even in a system dominated by powerful institutions, individual courage and collective action can drive change. The legal outcomes, regulatory responses, and corporate accountability measures are still unfolding. But the broader lesson is clear. Healthcare is a human endeavor, and every patient's experience matters. Monique Taylor and the thousands of patients affected by Ozempic and Wegovy remind us that progress in medicine is not just about new drugs or technological breakthroughs. It is about ethical practice, transparency, and unwavering commitment to patient safety. For viewers of White Coat Secrets, this is a call to awareness and engagement. The saga of Ozempic and Wegovy is not just a story about drugs. It is a story about the healthcare system, corporate responsibility, and the pursuit of justice. Share your experiences, ask questions, and hold institutions accountable. Subscribe to our channel to continue following this investigation. Stay informed about emerging medical controversies, and join a community committed to uncovering the truth. Because justice, transparency, and patient safety are not optional, they are essential. And every voice, including yours, contributes to a system where human lives are valued above profits.